Welcome to &DD, your go-to podcast for candid conversations. Dive deep with us into the heart of life's challenges, business hurdles, and the journey to better ourselves. Join us in exploring the art of living intentionally, finding balance, and enhancing not just your life, but your business and leadership skills. It's time to grow, to inspire, and to lead, &DD. Conversations that transform. &DD, and I'm Dave Evans.
And I'm Debbie Halls-Evans.
Hi, Debbie.
Hiya. Right, today, you just paused and stopped talking, so I'll carry on.
That's the plan.
Yeah, okay. We are continuing our foray into leadership or leadership, and it is our episode without guests to talk about the chapter. And chapter 1 is the one we're going to focus on today, Dave.
Brilliant.
And it's all about authentic or fake.
How does it feel, Debbie, to be in control of this episode?
Absolutely fine.
Great.
So, a couple of things. If you are following along with your book, I will share the pages that we're referring to as well. All makes it a little bit more fun, and also I can watch Dave then panic when I tell him a page number. So we're going to start with authentic or fake, and the first thing that I'd like to share is I think we looked at this as a definition of what is real first. So if you go to page 25, Dave.
Already there, Debbie.
Brilliant. So this is your writing and not my writing.
I know.
So talk to us about your definition of real and why it's important, particularly for this chapter as well.
Well, I think you have to decide what your leadership is and what your leadership isn't. So the first step of being real is to use the art to be exactly that. What is your leadership? So instead of being someone maybe who has an understanding of leadership, maybe has done training on it, learned certain skills, but has never stopped and said, my leadership is. That's the first step that you take.
So I just want to, because I think this is an important one. One of the things that you've always talked about and shared is the thing that could be missing is the how. So there's a lot of theory out there. We know we coach a lot of people who've gone through a lot of theory stuff. So if I am specifying or defining my leadership is, how do I do that?
Well, I think you choose one of your best characteristics that you have, or people have already told you that you positively work on, and then you make that a conscious choice on a daily basis. That on a daily, and that's daily, Debbie. Anyway, but that leads nicely into the second part of real, which is E, which is about defining your edge. Because there's things that you'll do. Some things you'll do naturally. Some people do leadership easier than others, and all of us can learn to be at the same standard. But edge is the thing you bring to the table, whether that's a natural thing you were born with, whether that's something you like doing. What's your personal edge and impact within your leadership? Okay,
so let's be really clear. How do I then specify or look at not me personally, but if I'm looking at leadership and I'm really struggling to define what my edge is, what's a great way of doing it?
To ask people.
Okay.
I remember my first encounter with somebody telling me what my edge might be was by accident. I was back in my days working in the world of retail, and my boss came to visit the store one day, and he said to me almost in passing, Dave, what I really like about you is when the times are tough, you still perform. And that was a good starting spot. It wasn't the answer, but somebody else was saying something in me. And that's a great place to start. It's to ask people you trust, what do they think?
Okay.
Another rather strange silent moment. I was hoping Debbie would talk while I gracefully cleared my throat.
No, you were drinking coffee.
Yeah, indeed.
Okay, so we're doing the word real. So we've done how we define our real leadership style. We now looked at how do I understand my own edge. So the final two are authenticity and leadership. So let's explore those a little bit before we go into the chapter.
Authenticity is really simple. I really loved it recently when a client told us the definition that I coached them a very long time ago in this exact same way. Kuhn from SR Mailing said, Dave, leadership is doing what you say you're going to do.
Yeah.
And I really like that. Don't be surprised at all if people don't rate you if you don't do what you said you were going to do.
And I also think there is, as we know, buzzwords and then some words go into fashion and all this kind of thing. Authentic and authenticity has been one of those things, I think, in the business arena. and has been taken out of it. And I think we do share that in the next chapter anyway. So, but I do think it's one to be conscious of.
Yeah.
Is that, when we're attempting to be authentic, we're ultimately being fake. I think I've just gone through the chapter. So, and then
No, but let's be clear. So, Debs, you almost made the error of the reader there.
I did.
Right, because we're not talking about authenticity in the context of the chapter yet.
No.
We're talking about you being judged by what you said because you didn't do it.
Yes. I get that. Okay. So the next one is leadership.
Yeah, this is leadership. I think you can look at the page in the book, but let me put a different spin on it for the benefit of listening to it. Leadership should have movement in it, should have energy in it, should have things happening in it. Leadership is not just the impact you're going to have, like it says in the book on the page. Leadership is doing. You've got to turn it into action. Leadership isn't stationary, right? Leadership is something like coaching. It's helping, it's managing, it's rolling your sleeves up sometimes alongside people, it's removing barriers out of the way. It's just not stationary.
Okay, I like that a lot.
Great.
Well, the other thing as well that we could probably throw into it, and you might challenge me on it, is leadership isn't being the expert either. And I think there's a lot of people that say they are great at exhibiting leadership because they're expert, and I think that can be very limiting. Personal opinion. So let's...
Debbie, it was Zig Ziglar that said, don't be the smartest person in the room.
He did, yes. Anyway, so we are now going to move to page 51, authentic or fake. So this is chapter 1.
Yep.
How we are sharing the book in these smaller sections is we're not doing an audio book or a reading. We're actually sharing where the stories came from and the impact an individual can take out of it.
Yep.
Dave and I have two very distinctive ways of reading. Dave is a Blinkist reader, so he likes to read at speed, even when he's training. I'm talking to you in the third part, it's quite interesting. But in regards when he's in his training, he puts the voice on speed.
Yeah, do you think it would be podcasts would be better? Like you go, hey Dave, how do you do it? Well, Debbie, I'm just joking.
Okay.
Yeah. But I do. When I'm indoors training, I listen to things on speed. When I'm outside cycling, climbing, I listen to them at 1.5 speed. So indoors is usually 1 or 2. It's 2 times, I think. But outside on the road, because you've got to be aware, a little bit slower.
But also, there's that to me, that's really important. Everybody's got a different way of doing the same thing. Right? We're just talking about reading right now or taking in information.
Also, did you know,
different.
Indoor, Blinkist summaries, outdoor, full book.
Right.
Did you know that?
No, I didn't know that. But anyway, I've just learnt that. So there you go. Always learning. So one of the things I wanted to do is I wanted to also share how we've built each of the chapters because it's a slightly different way. We wanted to be really clear about people absorbing knowledge quickly and then also how could they apply it in the real world. So we talked about knowledge, action and go deeper. So every chapter is built around that.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important because we share the knowledge, which we all need. So some of it's theoretical, some of it's very anecdotal. Then we talk about the very tangible actions that you can do. And if you want to, which it would be me, would be to explore more. We've got go deeper, references, resources and tools. Why are you grinning?
Because I feel like I'm in your seat.
Oh, right, okay.
Like, this is what you would say, right? Yeah, Dave, but why did you do that? Well, actually, here's the answer, Debbie. Is we did that so that it wasn't a pick the book up, read it, put it down, never pick it up again. It gives you multiple reasons to refer to it, to use it, and to learn in whatever way you like.
That's great. Thanks for sharing.
Pleasure.
That's sarcastic enough. All right, so let's look at why this is a particular face. So we originally called them faces. We've now just called them chapters.
Yeah.
But why does authentic or fake become a really important question in leadership or leadership?
Because if you make a change, right, to your style, maybe to your tonality, maybe to your language patterns, even appearance, right? You decide to be a certain way and it's new, it'll be fake to those who've known you. Mm-hmm. Now, you can take this out of leadership, right? When you give up a bad habit or something you've always done, doesn't have to be a bad habit. Let's say a simple one, you give up smoking, but you always went on the team smoking breaks at work. And then now you don't go, right? That's fake at first. It's weird for people. right? And then people find themselves going, "Oh, go on, just it won't hurt," right? Because they don't really understand. So that's the danger of fake space, because it's loaded with interference. Interference that's either assumptive, interference that's in other people's heads, your heads, and also interference that people haven't thought through on the journey to becoming an authentic part of you. Because authenticity usually, in my experience, starts off as fake. And that's the most dangerous time.
Okay, all right. So let's go a little bit further then, and let's understand what the differences are between. So really going into more detail about what you've just said about authentic and fake, because I think it's really important that the whole context of the book is built around 2 questions every single chapter.
Yeah.
This example is authentic or fake, but it's also understanding why those 2 words are as important as each other, whereas I think previously you weren't allowed to use one or the other. So let's explore that a bit more then.
Yep. So I think first of all, let's do it the other way around. Let's look at fakeness first, right? So because I think you've got to look at the perils you're going to face on the way to being in that spot. Well, there's countless coaching examples of people who've done this well, but one of the things to do is to let people know what you're about to do. So if you're making a change in advance, you could be going on a program, some kind of course. You could be, I always remember many years ago reading about someone who they were having their braces fitted to their teeth. So they told everybody. And the reason why they told everybody was, Debbie, why do you think they told everybody?
So that when they came in with the braces in, it wasn't a big reaction or people doing all of the external noise that impacts the other person as well.
Correct. And it's that awkward moment.
Yeah.
And that's just a good example of letting people know, right? If you were closing your shop for a refit, you'd tell people. If you were changing your service delivery levels, you'd tell somebody. If you were relocating, you'd tell somebody.
I think there's something about being a leader, which you started talking about, was it's dynamic, right? It's always moving. It's not stationary. And I think the bit about how fake is perceived is when somebody's going through unlearning or learning, because I might have to unlearn something. It's going to be clumsy. It's going to be, I have to follow the step 1, 2, 3 in my head. It might be even slower. The person represents himself in a very different way. And that's why, and we have loads of examples where people go away, they don't tell the team, and then they'll come back and they have a list of 30 things they want to implement in a business or in the role or the department or whatever. And then what then happens is everybody's grumpy and they don't want to do it, and then they use excuses. But then what they miss is the opportunity to continue to keep moving forward and lean in, because it feels fake, because it feels uncomfortable. I think that's the big part of it, isn't it? I think the semantics around the word fake can also be distractive in the wrong sense.
But also the feeling of fakeness for yourself. If you're making a real personal change inside your head, new thought processes, whatever they are, I am intentionally, if you're listening, not being specific, because I think it's I don't want to go anywhere towards anything specific yet, right? But when it's where you're making a personal change in your head or your heart, this understanding that the interference is closer to you than you ever realize. It's usually people who are really tight to you, either professionally or personally. If you haven't explained to them what's going on, they will naturally be concerned about you, which will make the fakeness feel worse. But if it's in your head, just think about learning a new skill that you've never done before. The first couple of times you do it, maybe sometimes depending on what the skill is, I can only go to a safe place. I remember when I first started riding with cycle cleats on my pedals where you had to clip in, you were terrified of falling off. Because when you stop your bike, your first response is put your foot down.
Yeah, and there's a couple of instances when you did just fall off.
I did just fall off, yeah. So there are lots of practical examples. Something that's new, not signalled or marked out, can appear fake.
I'm going to read something because I think this will take us next into authenticity. And one of the things that we talk about in Go Deeper is sometimes it's just reference and reading. And we love Brené Brown, her style and how she approaches it. And she says, which I think is the direct correlation to fakeness. Authenticity is a daily practice. Choosing authenticity means cultivating the courage to be emotional, honest, set boundaries, and allow others to be vulnerable.
Yep.
Exercising the compassion that comes from knowing that we are all. And I think that's really important, right? Because that's the bit about going from fake to being authentic, it becoming part of what you do, isn't it?
Yeah.
Whereas people miss that bit. They miss the bit that person's learning something new. There's going to, as we say, you start with the individual, you benefit the many.
Yeah.
But people don't like it. They don't like change, or they don't like somebody else growing or developing or having more skills than them. And particularly in leadership, leaders do not like people having more skills or ability than them. We're talking about a category and very generalised. But there are a large amount of leadership people who will not invest, develop or support people to transition from that fake to being this authentic.
Or let people ask for it.
Yeah, that's true.
Right? People don't ask for it and say, I want help with this. You know, and I think that's a huge thing. Authenticity is a choice, right? I think the world is so different at the time of recording this episode, right? It's so different. I'm sure it'll be even more different in the years ahead. But the tolerance of difference not being acceptable, as in not being accepted, is decreasing. As in, I don't know if that came out right, but people are less tolerant to people who won't tolerate difference, right?
Okay.
So the world's changing. The youth are changing the planet, the way we see things. And it doesn't actually matter whether you agree with the youth in some of these areas anymore, because you've got to accept a real frightening look in the mirror at reality and mortality. They're going to outlive you anyway, right? So there'll come a point where what you think, if you're not moving with human advancement, that you're going to be irrelevant faster. That's the difference. But authenticity is a choice. Authenticity is a moment where you commit yourself to something, and then if you speak it out, you do it. You know, we share in the book this really simple model called WALK, right?
Yep.
And it's designed to help you think through what leadership model are you using, what are you like. It shares with you, like your question from earlier, Debbie, about asking your close friends and colleagues to describe what you're like. Do you spend time learning? You know, I remember years ago listening to people say the older they get, the less they know, the more they want to learn.
Yeah, that's me.
I know that's you, right? But this is pre-you,
Yeah,
right?
Pre-me.
And it's one of those idioms or cliches that's true. So if you're not learning, what are you doing? You know, you can't rely on past glories in any industry anymore. The world is shrinking in terms of digitally. And the idea then, if you're not learning, you can't put knowledge into action. Therefore, you can't build authenticity.
Yeah, I agree. Because I think another thing people say, oh, I've learned this or I'm learning this. But learning is only the application. It's the doing. And I think that's where people, you know, that's when it becomes fake as well. So I think there's that definition of, if you're moving from fake into authenticity because you're learning, you're developing, you're applying, you're being, you're doing, that's the positive. The negative side is you tell everybody that you learnt all this new stuff, but you never apply it. So it goes back to that whole leadership. I don't do what I say I'm going to do. And I think those are the differences. And if you can distinguish that from the types of fake versus... I think I do like your analogy of it's all about movement.
It is about
from
movement.
one to the other, and moving and learning and messing up and trying it again and doing it again and practice.
If you think about authenticity and transparency, right? So as an owner of a business, sometimes there's a fallacy of being an owner of a company, but you forget sometimes the impact that you ultimately sign off the finances and people's paychecks, right? And the person who isn't the owner has the opposite. They're worried also subconsciously about, they might even be the safest role in the world. It still influences their thinking. Transparency about a problem in a business can be, you just want to tell everybody how hard it is, what the real risks actually are. And that's also not necessarily what authenticity is. Authenticity is, in those scenarios, demonstrating compassion and empathy.
Yeah.
Not overdoing it, but actually stepping in and saying, whatever the feelings you're having are. I'm not sure what to do about this is okay to say. Pretending you know everything or pretending it's going to be all right is not the answer. You've got to have that ability to be authentic even under pressure. There's a saying that an accountant once said to me: you want to see what people are really like? Wait till they don't have enough money. Right? Now, you don't have to go to these hard examples to decide what you're going to be like. You can be authentic in all of these situations. Be true to who you've decided you are.
Okay. So looking at what this could mean for the individual. So how can someone help themselves? So when we talk about these particular parts of leadership and leadership and the examples and the comparisons, so not comparison because we never want anybody to compare themselves to somebody else, but comparison of word, so the authentic or fake. Am I being fake now so I can start to understand, am I moving or am I just telling people and never demonstrating the growth or the change? So what else can I do to ensure that at times when I need to be fake in my learning mode, how do I make sure that I do keep moving, that I do move towards authenticity? Because I actually think that is the hardest part.
It is. I'd like to talk about believing and knowing in a minute, right?
Which is page 58 for anybody.
Thanks, Debbie. But I think you have to go right back to the beginning of this chapter where we talk about the power of interference. Mm-hmm. There's loads of formulas in the book, like peak performance, etc. Yeah. But I want to really zone in on interference. The faster you get to learn how you manage interference in your life, the better you'll become as a leader. Now, interference usually shows up in the strangest of ways, right? It can be what happens to you in your car on the way to work. It can be a song that plays. It can be a memory from a picture. It can be a smell that, from your youth. It could be, real daft stuff. It can be how someone looks at you, all built on assumption of what you thought that meant. Yeah. It could be somebody giving you an aggressive look in a coffee shop that's looking past you, that because you're in a sensitive mood in that moment, you think they're looking at you, right? It doesn't happen to me very often, I'm glad to say, but but it could be that, right? They're all forms of interference. It could be a sentence that your boss says, and it could be a word in that sentence that sends your internal dialogue into overload. And there's many more. Can you think of any?
Oh, I'm just thinking of examples that I have with you. So when you say the word can't to me,
yep,
I have an instant trigger response for me is that, well, one, nobody should be saying I can't do something. So yeah, I do see it. I see it. And it's very easy to do. Sat in a car, yep, or somebody cuts you up on the motorway, or on the road or whatever, we actually assume that person's done it on purpose because that puts us in a bad mood and it has this catalytic effect. So it happens every time. It can be something as simple as spilling your milk in the morning, can't it?
Yeah.
And the knock-on effect it has, yeah.
Yeah, and so it's therefore, if you have interference, the choice is to have skills and options to help you manage that interference, ranging from the ridiculous to the really logical. And it's having a toolbox to do that, and just as a ridiculous one, I remember once speaking to our son who was angry when he was younger, and a ridiculous technique was, I asked him what colour was the anger, and he went, it was red and it was hot. So I said to him very quickly from the world of NLP, I said, look, what if you were to make it, really cold blue? And he turned it to cold blue. I said, what happens now if you put it on the floor and smash it? In that split second, if you listen to this, that sounds like a really odd thing to have said. But let's also be highly logical in the explanation. We took a feeling, we gave it an identity, we checked its heat, we changed its colour, and we made it cold, and then we smashed it up. We used distortion in a positive way to change our frame of reference. That's how you deal, in that example of the anger, instantly with interference, right? You can do breath work and get to the same result.
So that I understand, as I get lost sometimes in my own head, as we know. So authentic or fake means that we've got to understand the interference in both of them.
Yeah.
So even from a fake perspective, when we're learning, developing and moving forward into our leadership, or when we're being authentic, we've also got to understand what's the interference that can sometimes stop us. So, I think the thing about authenticity is it's consistent.
Yep.
And I think because that's very hard to do, right? It's hard to be consistent. It's hard to be constant.
But this is where believing and knowing comes in, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you believe in something, it's a really great start.
Yeah.
Right? But you have to move believing from this believe space I believe in into I know that. I'm certain about that. That's in my internal tapestry, right? When you know, you are more authentic. Naturally.
Yeah.
And I do apologize to anybody listening, because that is such a huge subject in its own right, right? Believing in a better future and knowing that you're going to have one is a journey in your life. And I don't mean to use the word journey, Debbie, because I didn't want it to sound like, a journey and be almost fluffy.
Yeah.
But that is the human inner transformation that your life journey is usually about. And life journey being, if you live 70 10 to 70 years plus.
70.
I always remember from the
Okay.
Bible, right? When I was a kid at Sunday school, there'd be 10 was the average, thing. However, if you get to live a long and fruitful life, one of the summaries, one of the look back moments is that you will have transformed on the inside over a very, very long time, one way or the other, that human transcendence. And I think that's what knowing is. But you can do it today is the point.
Yeah,
you don't have to wait.
Yeah, I also think we've got to allow people the grace as well. Believing in something is very hard.
Yeah.
Now, and I'm talking about believing in self is very hard, whereas believing in something else isn't. So, and I'm thinking of something really random. So you could believe in a political message, right?
Yep.
But then you wouldn't believe that you were capable of writing a book, right?
Yep.
So, and it's understanding is how you understand yourself better, that we can believe what we choose to believe. Our beliefs can be forced upon us by our social circles or external circles, but people don't sit there and spend time defining, honing, developing, what do I really believe, and do I genuinely believe it? My brain goes over to things like manifestation, right? So manifestation has got a bad rep
And a good rep.
But I think when you genuinely believe that you have got the skill, the competency, the drive, the ability to do something, that's when manifestation becomes positive, is because it's through action.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. When I sit there and think, oh, I want £1 million and it's going to now come through my letterbox because I've manifested it,
Yep.
I don't believe that's going to happen. And I think I think we've just got to be, I know it's a challenge for a lot of people. What is it that I truly believe?
Yep.
And do you believe it or do you just say it? And I think then, so there is a tie to this for me, is that sometimes has got to be fake. I've got to start at that point. I don't necessarily believe this about myself right now. I'll give you a really personal example. Giving up drinking. Right, for me, it's my 6th year that I'll be sober this year, which I think is awesome. But at the beginning, I never believed that I would be able to be at that point where it didn't bother me, it didn't faze me, it wasn't part of my, my daily routine or anything like that. But it took time for me to build that belief, and now it's literally a core part of me. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the difference with your...
But with your example, all of your interference was close to you.
Yeah, it was.
It wasn't strangers.
Yeah.
It wasn't restaurants and meals
No.
out. It was all people you knew.
Yeah.
And they didn't mean it.
No.
Right?
But it also from my own past behaviours, so going from that, this is what I'd done before, so therefore that was what they perceived my authentic self to be.
Yeah.
Whereas it wasn't. I wasn't happy in that space. But yeah, I do think it's really incredible that you can... Literally, we're talking about leadership and leadershit, and ultimately how that builds itself. But actually, everything starts with the individual and understanding what do I believe, and then how do I take that into a knowing? Because that's the bit I think about belief that gets lost.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I'd like to give a real soft example. If you've ever been somewhere really amazing, right, where I always think about the Hyde in London, great restaurant.
Brilliant restaurant.
Brilliant restaurant, right?
Opposite St James's Park for anybody.
Now, and we must tag them. Great place. And we told some visitors here at the farm recently about it. And, you kind of know that they deliver.
Mm-hmm.
You know they're good. But you still hope
Yeah.
that the person that goes has that experience. And our friends from the US went. They had exactly the experience we predicted. Mm-hmm. And then their responses about how they went there was they knew too. It was like both parties went from not hoping and believing into, yeah, you're right. But in that example, when you learn to know and somebody else knows too, it reinforces the knowing. And I know we were only talking about a restaurant, but if the people close to you in your leadership can believe, if they can turn that believing into knowing, I got to watch the Oklahoma Sooners last year, did we?
You did.
At Andy and Colette's house.
Yes.
And we watched this lady in the very last pitch bowling, right? They were losing and they were about to lose their record. And then this lady steps up to the place where she hits the ball from, wherever that's called, right? And you could tell in her eyes that she was going to hit this out the park and everyone was going to run round and they were going to score and win. And that is exactly what happened. You knew looking at it. You just had this sense, something's going to happen here. And sport shows us patterns like that all of the time. But remember, that's not a fluke. They've got some kind of long winning trail that goes for several years. Yeah. So it's no wonder that she was able to step up and know. In the same way the team they were playing against had a bad feeling. You could see it in the bowler's eyes. But that's knowing. And without staying in the world of sport, I just want to encourage anyone listening. Knowing is when beliefs become something that you are so certain about, you don't question it anymore. And you live like you know. That's great leadership.
It is. So, knowing that we've explored this fabulous topic, one of my favourite ones so far, Dave.
Great.
We've got a few more to go. One of the things that we also wanted to share, which we've not seen in many books, is when we are challenging a question or we want to know what it is and what it isn't. We want to know what are those tangible examples. And at the end of every chapter, you'll see this, and we call it about self-assessing your own leadership. So in this particular one, we've got what leadership is and what it isn't. And I think it's really important because sometimes we convince ourselves that we might be in the leadership camp. But actually what we've done is we've just done something that's a bit leadership. Because you can be all of it, in a moment you can go from one to the other. So I think just knowing what's here, Dave, is... I want to just share what the isn't is and then kind of share it back to you. So one of the things that we said it isn't is being the interference to someone in the team when they are practicing a new skill or belief through banter, passive aggression, remarks or cracking a joke. And I do think that's what genuinely happens, is that as a leader, we might be uncomfortable. So therefore, we literally move that dial to leadership because we start undermining somebody else as they're going through that fake stage to authentic.
Quick example.
Yes.
A few years ago, I was doing a phobia cure of snakes.
Yep.
Right?
Oh, yes.
That's right.
Yeah.
With a very senior guy in a business.
Yeah.
And we did the cure. I'd warned him about banter. We walk into the canteen of this contact centre and the CEO threw their tie at him, going, watch out for the snake.
Yeah.
Now, fortunately, we were armed and they knew what to do and to brush it off and to let the process we'd just done do its work. And they're not scared of snakes today. But that's an example of that.
Yeah, that's good. And then the other thing that we said is a really great way of moving to authentic from fake is regular one-to-one conversations, and ensuring that you do what you say you will do.
Yeah.
Yep, I think that's a really good example. So if you have got the book, if you haven't, we've got the link in the episode details as well. But that's authentic and fake. And we're going to bring a guest in and we're going to share some more really great examples of what authentic or fake are in the real world and in the real people actually living it too.
And my final thing, Debbie, in this chapter is just to remind people that when you're being real with your leadership isn't static.
Yeah.
Leadership is about movement.